Today's testimony is one of the darkest you will ever hear, and it's very graphic, so watch at your own risk. Zachary King is a former Satanist who has been on a journey to expose the secrets of the groups he was part of. But Zachary wasn't just any Satanist. He was once one of the 10 most powerful people in the world, working with names that all of you would recognize. Reaching that position doesn't happen overnight, so to understand his life, we need to go back to his childhood, where it all began. It was the first day of 5th grade, and I was discovering the truth about magic. A boy came up to me and said, "Meet me in the bathroom during the first break." It was 1976, there was no internet, no way to search. If someone tells you to meet them in the bathroom, don't go. So, not knowing any better, I went to the bathroom at 10:20, and there were about 49 other kids there, boys and girls, just waiting for something to happen. They told us we were going to turn off the lights and chant a phrase in the mirror 11 times, and if we did it right, the spirit of a burn victim would appear in the mirror. None of us believed what they were telling us. I had never seen this in a movie or cartoon, no friend had ever told me about it, my older brother never mentioned it, my parents never talked about it, I never heard about it at church. But the boy, around my age, was telling this story, and I thought, let's try and see what happens. So, they turned off the lights, which was already a red flag, because some of us were still afraid of the dark. Suddenly, we were in a completely dark room. We chanted the phrase 11 times. And then, all of a sudden, the mirror flickered, and there was a face there that wasn't any of ours. It looked like the spirit of a burn victim. Its face was partially melted, the upper lip melted and hanging over the exposed teeth. 49 kids ran screaming out of the bathroom. In my talks, I say that one kid, one idiot, and I call myself an idiot because it was me, stayed in the bathroom thinking I had made that happen. I had chanted that phrase 11 times and made that face appear. That's insane. Remember, at 10 years old, you're not the smartest. That mirror wasn't a distant land I was accessing. It wasn't the room behind the mirror. If you're seeing it in the mirror, it's beside you. There was a demon beside me that I couldn't see, but I was seeing its reflection in the mirror. Notes were sent home because some kids got seriously hurt. Not just scratches or bruises, but broken arms and legs. The school didn't care about the spiritual well-being of the students. All they knew was that kids were getting hurt and they could be sued. So I took this note to my dad, who was in his office reading the newspaper. My dad had been a sniper in the Marines and rarely used a loving tone. Usually he just signed the note and handed it back to me, but that day he read it, frowned, and with his usual loving tone asked, "Were you playing that game?" Terribly scared of my dad as I was, I told the absolute truth. So that I wouldn't get caught at school and suspended for 3 days, and so I wouldn't have to spend those awful 3 days with my dad, I started playing the game at home. At school, I only played once a day, but at home it was different. I'd wake up and play, go to the bathroom and play, wash my hands and play, brush my teeth and wash my face and play, go out for breakfast and come back to brush my teeth and play again. By the time I left for school, I had already played at least 10 times. When I came home from school, usually no one was there. My parents wouldn't get home until late at night, so I'd play the game between 25 to 50 times a day. Every time I played, I'd see the scary face, but I attributed this scary face to the bulldog law. Bulldogs are some of the friendliest dogs in the world, but with the ugliest faces. They didn't choose to have that face. Maybe this person had the luck of JW. Maybe they were born with that face, or maybe they had melted in a fire. They couldn't control the face they had. Maybe they were good people. Back then, I didn't realize I was looking at a demon. And why did I do this so many times? It seemed like if you did it a few times, the face would appear, and from the stories I heard, the face didn't move. It was just a still face in the mirror. So why did I keep doing this so many times? Because I could make the face appear. If you can do something that no one else seems to be able to do, you're good at school. They sent notes home saying that you had to stop. Most of the kids stopped, some kept playing, I don't know why they kept playing, risking getting suspended for 3 days. I played at home, and it worked. I could play whenever I wanted, and every time I did, the face would appear. it didn't talk to me. It wasn't a different face. It seemed to always be the same face, so it was kind of familiar, and I had the feeling that it was my friend, even though it didn't say anything to me. All I had to do was stay in the bathroom in the dark and chant that phrase, and this guy would appear. Well, as strange as it sounds, that was the gateway to the next part, which I would call real magic because it had tangible effects on my life. But I had been interested in magic from a young age. After that incident in the bathroom, I started doing it more often because obviously there was something there and people didn't want me playing, but I felt empowered because I could do something that most people couldn't. But it started getting more intense when I added other spells to it. Where did I get these spells from and why did I start doing them? I played Dungeons and Dragons with a group of older teenagers, and there were two of us, both young. I was 10 years old, and another boy was also 10. I was always the wizard or the sorcerer, and I started noticing that my magic spell worked every time. Now, I wasn't doing a real magic spell. You roll the dice, and the dungeon master rolls the dice to see if you succeed. Just to give more context for those who don't know, D&D stands for Dungeons and Dragons, and it's a board game. We're talking about the board game, and in the game, when you try to do something with a spell, you always roll between 15 and 20, so it always works in the game. And for more context, it's a role-playing game, so you play a role based on the character you created. You have a dungeon master who does many things and organizes things, so you don't even roll the dice, they do it. Roll. It's a 20-sided die, a game based on math, so a lot of nerds play it. I was having a lot of fun playing it, but my magic always worked, so I started thinking, what if I did a real magic spell, not in the game, just in real life, and it worked? Now, I know better than to tell someone I'm going to do a magic spell. I'm just a nerdy little kid. I'm already made fun of enough as it is. I don't need to be made fun of for one more thing. I'm not going to tell anyone, but I'll see if it works. If it doesn't work, I'll probably never do magic again. I'll let it go and find something else to do. Maybe start building car models. But if it works, I'll do it every day for the rest of my life. In the D&D books and in the TSR game books, I found out that Gary Gygax, one of the founders of the game, went to the Satanists and asked for real spells so that the game would be more authentic. There was a spell in there to get money because you need money to run a campaign. So, I did the money spell on a Friday, and on Saturday, when I went out to play, I found a can of tennis balls. When I opened it, there were 3 new tennis balls inside, which was already cool, but there was also a $5 bill in the can. This was in 1976, and the 3 most important things to me were comic books, candy bars, and loose candy. Back then, candy cost 25 to 50 cents each. When I was a kid, it cost a penny. Comic books cost 15 to 20 cents, and candy bars did too. So with $5, I could buy 500 pieces of candy. That was an incredible treasure, but it could have been a coincidence. Someone had to find that can, so the next weekend I did the spell again, and the next day I found a $10 bill on the street. All I wanted was very cheap stuff, and that meant 1,000 pieces of candy. But this could still be a coincidence. The next weekend, I had an even more ingenious idea. I didn't know what that face that appeared in the mirror was, but I made it appear out of nowhere. Where did it come from? From the sky or from hell? Was I summoning it from the cemetery? Maybe this was magic, and maybe it was a power that I could somehow use for myself. So I did the money spell in my bathroom at home, and in the middle of the spell, I did the Bloody Mary chant. When the face appeared, I made it clear that I was doing a money spell, and then I finished my spell. That night, I went to sleep, and the next day, I went out to play. I was in a large, unpaved parking lot when something shiny caught my attention. I ran to see what it was, and when I got there was nothing shiny, but it looked like Monopoly money wrapped with rubber bands. I put it in my pocket, went back to play, and eventually, late at night, after everyone had showered and gone to bed, I was in my room with the lights off, sitting on the bed with a flashlight in my mouth and a sheet over my head, unrolling the rubber bands to see what I had. It looked like Monopoly money because I had never seen a $100 bill, But when I unrolled everything, there was $1,000 in $100 bills. In 1976, that would be worth around $7,000 today. Think of how much candy I could buy with that. Of course, I didn't spend it all on candy. I bought many things that a 10-year-old shouldn't have. It occurred to me that if I did the spell every day and it always worked like this, in 1 year I could buy a Lamborghini Countach, which was my dream car, or if I did it for 3 years, I could be a millionaire. I didn't consider that I would have to explain to my dad where all this money came from. He'd probably make me stop doing it. It was a strange way to talk about it, so I kept it a secret. But I want to make it clear that I didn't find $1,000 every day. I did the spell every day, and most of the time I only got a little bit. It took me a while to spend the $1,000, and when I finally spent it, whenever I did the spell again, I'd get $20, which is still significant. In today's value, it would be like finding a $100 bill every day. It's very significant, and that's why I wanted to go deeper. The magic kept giving a little more each time, taking me further and further in. About a year after starting with this, I was initiated into Satanism. During this period, I went through a disturbing incident at school, and I think that after that, things really took it to another level. I can explain why that was so important in my story. At my school, the bathroom break time was 3 minutes between classes. The gym class was on the other side of the school, outdoors. When you go in, you have 3 minutes to get across the school to the next class, which is math. I entered the room needing to go to the bathroom badly, so I raised my hand, the teacher called on me, and I asked to go to the bathroom. She asked why I hadn't gone during the 3 minutes between classes. I explained that it wasn't enough time to go to the bathroom and get here. I would have been late and she would have given me detention. I had gym class before this one and there wasn't enough time. She gave me the pass and told me not to dawdle, to go to the bathroom, do what I needed to do, and come back. So, I walked down the hall and entered the bathroom. When I went in, I heard a noise, like someone was breathing heavily, but I looked under all the stalls and didn't see any feet. There were about 5 stalls and 1 large stall for the disabled. There was no one in there. I opened the first door, no one. The second, the same. The third and fourth, also nothing. This was getting extremely scary because I could hear someone was there, but I couldn't see anyone anywhere. I looked at the ceiling, the corners, the vents, wondering if someone was hiding. If someone was hiding in a vent, they probably would have scared me to death, or if I looked up and saw someone on the ceiling, I had seen all those movies, and that would have scared me too, but there was no one in any of the stalls. So I opened the last door, and an unexpected situation happened with a teacher, which resulted in a very uncomfortable event for me. She told me that if I told anyone about the incident, my life would be ruined, and I couldn't tell anyone. I had to keep it a secret. I went back to my classroom where my teacher hinted that I had taken so long because I had some health problem, making embarrassing comments in front of the whole class. It's important to note that I still hadn't been able to use the bathroom. Because the teacher had refused to let me go back, she also mocked the situation, making me question if she knew what had happened to me or if it was just a routine comment. After that experience, I lost trust in using the school bathrooms and never went back to one at the school, fearing I'd repeat the negative experience. I couldn't go to the bathroom on the way home, wondering if I'd find someone waiting in another bathroom. I ended up getting home, and unfortunately, accidents happened. I washed my clothes and took a bath in the hottest water I could stand, trying to feel clean. I did this almost every day for about 3 weeks. In a moment of desperation, I thought about extreme ways to feel clean on the inside, but I knew the consequences. The only thing that made me feel better was the magic. When I practiced it, I felt invincible. I studied many books on magic in the library and honed my skills, applying magic to various situations with mixed results. I reconnected with a friend who had been absent from school and church. He explained that he hadn't moved but was homeschooled and went to a different church. He found a group that played Dungeons and Dragons and believed magic was real, inviting me to join them. At my house, we watched age-appropriate movies. But at this new group's house, the situation was different. with access to inappropriate content. They tried to convince me that I could take control of my life again, promising opportunities to appear in movies and receive international attention. They proposed an integration with a group of sisters and promised that I would learn about relationships in a respectful and safe way, starting with the youngest, who was 8, while I was 12. This phase was marked by challenging experiences and choices, influenced by an environment that, in retrospect, was not suitable or safe for a child of my age. Once she felt you had learned everything she could teach, you would move on to the 11-year-old sister and go through the same process. After that, you would move on to the 14-year-old. When you graduated with the 14-year-old, you would be ready to participate in movies. This friend who took me to this place told me that they were cool, they played Dungeons and Dragons, and when I went there, they had all this technology, things I couldn't do at home, so I thought it was cool and started going there more often. I had no idea that it was a satanic pact. To me, they were just people who were nice to me, letting me do things my parents wouldn't allow. They had a cupboard full of chocolate bars, and I didn't need permission. I could just go in and take as many as I wanted. At home, my dad would tell me not to eat too much so I wouldn't get sick, but there, no one said anything. At home, we ate pizza maybe 3 times in our lives, but there, I could eat pizza every night if I wanted. It was the opposite of my house. My parents were like the no police, just like God, from the perspective of a 12-year-old who thought the Bible always said no. So there was this group that always said yes, and I started leaning toward them. At the Baptist church, I learned that Jesus defeated the devil on the cross 2,000 years ago, and that he wasn't a threat to us now, and that the devil was afraid of the Baptist church. So, the devil wouldn't do anything to me because I was Baptist. But if I really believed in these things then, when I was involved in a spiritual war, and everyone is in some way, if I didn't believe the devil was a threat, he could attack me every day without fear because I wouldn't think it was the devil attacking. Now, going back to what I was saying about the movies. I started hanging out with them shortly after my birthday. It was probably the first time I went. They showed me all sorts of content they had at home, probably within the first month of me being there, and then they introduced me to these 3 sisters. Around the same time, I agreed that I wanted to participate in the activities. It seemed fun, and suddenly I was interested in girls. Not only was I interested, but I would have the opportunity to interact with them, which was very exciting for me. I found out the girls were sisters, and that they had been involved in activities since they were very young, and their mother since the same age. When I was with the second girl who was guiding me, we heard the back door open. I froze, because that was the door their mother came through. She knocked on the door, and I told her not to open it, terrified, thinking she would be like my dad. But then she came in, talked to her daughter, spoke with me, invited me to dinner, and asked if I was learning everything properly or if I needed more time. The daughter replied, no, that I was keeping up just fine. She already knew how long the process would take, indicating that I wasn't the first to go through this. She estimated that I would stay with the oldest sister for another week or 2, as I was almost ready. I was surprised by her calmness, and she explained that there was no reason for concern, as it was part of their responsibility. They knew what they were doing, and they were competent at it. She invited me to dinner, but I said I needed to call my parents. After getting permission from my dad, who lived nearby, I stayed for dinner. She also asked my dad if I could spend the night, and he agreed as long as I came back on Saturday. She mentioned that I would stay in her son's room, which gave me a bit more comfort. It's important to mention this because, although I was attending a group with peculiar beliefs, my parents, who were Baptists and attended church, seemed unaware of the true nature of the place. They felt comfortable leaving me there because they knew almost all the members. But they didn't know it was a group with different practices. The deacons from my church attended the place, which made me feel safe because I saw them regularly at church for years. It seemed like a safe place to be, and my parents, busy with their businesses, didn't investigate deeply. They just saw it on the surface and thought everything was fine. The place allowed me to do things my parents wouldn't let me do, and I felt comfortable there, but I still didn't know the full nature of the group. I found that out when I was 12, already involved in the group's activities. I didn't realize I was being placed in a complicated situation with every interaction I had. We received appreciation letters asking for more of my participation, written on school paper. My fake name was Tommy, and the letters asked for Tommy to show up with other children from the group for performances. The requests were specific, and all of us felt valued for having someone admire us and wanting to see us in the performances. At that time, we didn't have any awareness of who the spectators were. We didn't know the term pedo, philo, until much later in life. Certainly, it wasn't something discussed when we were kids in the 70s. It was obvious, however, that the spectators weren't children like we had initially thought. Some people wanted a photo of us, an image of us naked, and then asked for our autograph on it. We did this, and I would write something funny like, "Eat your vegetables," something kids normally wouldn't want to hear, not realizing I was writing this for an adult. In my mind, I felt famous. I had many fans, and they told me I would be famous. I truly thought I was a big celebrity, without any idea that it was adults making these requests. I didn't realize they were adults until I was probably in my 20s. But when I was 12, an older boy in the coven approached me and said, "You know you're in a satanic coven, right?" And ran off. I laughed at it at the time. I remember what I had as a reference. I used to watch the Batman show with Adam West in the 60s. When Batman, Robin, and Commissioner Gordon appeared on screen, the screen was upright because they were honest and law-abiding. When villains like the Joker, the Penguin, Catwoman, and the Riddler appeared, the screen tilted because they were corrupt. To me, the bad people in my life were those who always said no. "Dad, can I go to this event?" No. "Dad, can I go here?" No. Everything I wanted to do was denied. By default, the people who went against my parents were the good ones. Wanted pizza? Got it. Wanted McDonald's? There it was. I could eat all the chocolates I wanted without anyone telling me I was getting fatter, that it was unhealthy, that I could develop diabetes, or that no girl would want to date me. No one said any of that. They just asked if I wanted more. So, when that guy told me I was in a satanic coven, I thought it couldn't be, because these were the good people, right? How could they be the bad ones? I spent about 2 weeks thinking about that comment, wondering if it could be true. These people let me do everything I wanted. I went to Moody Blues shows, saw movies that premiered on Fridays on the same day. How could Satan be the villain? So I went to one of the adult members I trusted and told him. I said, "You're going to laugh," expecting him to laugh, pat me on the back, and tell me to go play, saying it wasn't a satanic coven. But instead, he confirmed that it was. My heart sank. I asked, "Am I part of this?" And he asked if I would like to be. That's when I realized the truth about where I was. I was reluctant to accept the reality because I felt scared. Despite discovering the truth about the group, I chose not to leave because of the benefits I received. I thought about what I would lose. I was already involved in behaviors inappropriate for my age and receiving items I wouldn't otherwise have access to, like prohibited substances. Additionally, smoking and drinking were habits I had acquired, both legally inaccessible due to my age. I also received illegal substances for free, and if I left the group, I would have to buy them, assuming I could still find them. Within the group, I was treated as a prominent figure, a perception that was completely different from the way I was treated at school. This sense of status and acceptance made it difficult to decide to leave the group, despite the obvious risks. I was led to believe that the group represented the good ones, a common manipulation tactic to maintain control over the members. Over time, this view was questioned. The revelation that I was in a satanic group gradually emerged. Initially, when an older member mentioned it, I didn't take it seriously, unable to associate the people who were fulfilling my desires with any negative connotation. After reflecting on this information for a few weeks, I decided to confront one of the adult members I trusted. His confirmation about the nature of the group was a turning point for me, deeply altering my perception and understanding of the environment I was involved in. The idea of selling your soul, as it was presented in the story, symbolizes a total commitment to the group and its practices. Over time, and with a clearer perspective, I understood that the notion of selling your soul is a metaphor for the deep manipulation and control exerted over you, and that in reality, such an act is impossible because it's based on deceit to maintain control over people. Today, I use my experience to enlighten others on the importance of discernment and authenticity, explaining that it's not possible to alienate something as intrinsic and personal as the soul. In my talks, I emphasize the importance of recognizing and resisting these kinds of manipulations. I asked myself, why not? And the answer is that it doesn't belong to us. That's why you can't sell your soul. It doesn't belong to you. You may have heard that God died for you, that Jesus paid the ultimate price for your soul. You don't own it, you can't lend it, rent it, and certainly you can't sell it. Maybe you've also heard that the devil is a liar. I'm here to confirm, if the devil tells you good morning, get a second opinion. It's a funny quote, but yes, that's why I'm Christian today. Because, in fact, I couldn't sell my soul. What I did was surrender my will to the devil. Now, going back to the story from the perspective of when I was 12 years old and became a member by signing the document, since I had already completed the other steps, I think it was around that time they gave me a robe. Robes are something we see in satanic rituals in movies. There are black and red robes, but there's also the white one. The white robe represents innocence, and that's what I wore when I first entered the place. There was a big welcoming ceremony for the coven, and I entered wearing a white robe. They perform a full baptism in something that looks like an inverted demon skull with human blood, pig's blood, and human urine. After that, you are led to another room to take a bath and change into a black robe with an inverted red pentagram. This symbolizes that you have been baptized into a world of darkness. Then, they read the document you signed the night before, show your signature, and you show your cut thumb to confirm that it's your blood. After everything, they give you a circle with a crucifix in the center, which you turn upside down, symbolizing a human sacrifice. You break the arms of the figure of Christ, renouncing him, and then there's a celebration with orgies to mark your initiation as a Satanist. But in reality, this celebration is a grim reminder that one day you will die and go to hell. As they say, this document will be kept forever with the circle in a vault, and your soul is bound to it. When I officially entered the coven, everyone who practiced magic shared their Book of Shadows with me. The Book of Shadows is a personal book where you write all your spells. You can perform the same spells I did, but in your own way, whatever works for you. So, I would read their spell book to see how they did things, because there might be something I liked and wanted to incorporate into my practice. They gave me the red robe, which is for the magician, the official person who performs the coven's magic. Anyone in the coven can practice magic, but when someone pays 10,000 for a spell, it's the magician who performs it. You can request a specific magician, or just a magician in general, but in any case, it's the person in the red robe who will do it. I never wore my black robe. I wore the black robe when I left the room after being baptized and taking a bath. I wore the black robe for about 10 minutes, and then when I officially became a member of the coven, they made me change into the red robe. So, pretty much as soon as I became an official member of the coven, I was given the red robe, which meant I would perform the magical rituals for the coven. When I was 14 years old, it was announced that all male members between the ages of 12 and 15 would be involved with a 19-year-old female member who was in her second pregnancy. She was what we called a creator, someone who intentionally became pregnant for specific purposes related to the group. I went home to research it because I didn't know what it was. My parents once whispered the word, so I knew it was something forbidden, but I didn't know more than that. The family dictionary was so old that it didn't have a specific word for the act. So I went to the library and found 2 books, each about 300 pages long. I didn't want to read all of that just to figure out what it was, so I asked my cousin in the coven. He explained to me that what she was going to do was terminate the pregnancy under specific conditions, which was legal in some contexts, but outside of those circumstances, it would be considered wrong. Our coven, for example, did everything from simple spells to more complex ones, which included a hex. For a hex, you need to perform this act along with it. If someone is willing to pay a lot for something, you have to ensure its success. To ensure success, you need to offer something the devil wants. What he wants in these situations is a significant sacrifice. So you make a sacrifice for the devil, and he grants your wish, making your act successful. This is similar to what was seen in ancient cultures with offerings to deities. They made sacrifices to gain the favor of the gods. Today, there are practices that resemble this, but the context is different, often packaged as something else, though the intention remains the same. In the past, sacrifices were made to deities like Baal or Moloch. At first, I was told that it was just a cluster of cells. They would only remove a few cells using a small tube, and I wouldn't see anything more than that. But to perform the spell, I needed to have blood on my hands, which would probably be the blood of the woman involved. The goal wasn't to harm her, just to obtain a small amount of blood for the ritual. They instructed me to practice with a scalpel on an apple, an orange, or a ball of modeling clay, simulating the process of obtaining the blood. They assured me it would be simple. For 9 months, I participated in these activities, including certain rituals. The woman informed me that this was her second pregnancy. When asked about the purpose, she explained that the more she did this, the higher her status in the group would be, a quest for power and influence. If she managed to perform a certain number of these acts, she would reach the top. This intense pursuit of power explains why some people fiercely defend this practice. There was a case where the Satanic Church argued that this practice was a religious rite. This occurred in Minnesota, where they even opened a clinic. This is a sensitive issue, especially for some individuals who may have experienced a personal loss and can relate to the emotional weight of the situation. Returning to my story, at 15, I performed my first procedure of this type. Later, when I entered college, I had to leave my original coven, but I still wanted to find a new group. I thought my hometown coven was unique, but there were 2 groups there. One I didn't like, which seemed to attract problematic people, and another that seemed to have more positive individuals. Both were satanic groups, but I needed to be well informed to know they existed. If it hadn't been for a boy who recruited me when I was 12, I would never have gotten involved. At college, I wondered how I would find a satanic coven in a big city. I knew covens were discreetly mentioned in classified ads in specific magazines, but I ended up finding an ad on the university campus. There were several student unions, including a satanic one. I attended a meeting of that student union, which was made up of young people who, for the first time away from home and without adult supervision, associated Satanism with behaviors like substance use, alcohol consumption, and sexual activity, things I had already been involved with since I was 12. I don't need a satanic coven for that, and these guys come up with magical spells on the spot. They get drunk and say things like, "I'm going to open this can of beer, take a sip, put the can in front of me, spin it over my head 3 times, then I'll drink it all at once and throw the can in the trash. If I can do that, tomorrow I'll get a free new truck." That's not a magic spell, it's just a silly wish. They make it up, and the next day, when nothing happens, they say, "It didn't work. Let's try again next week." This leads us to discuss the 2 types of satanic covens, because clearly there are Satanists who worship the devil, but there are also Satanists who claim not to believe in either God or Satan. Well, as I mentioned before, there are probably 10,000 different covens. There's a coven for just about anything, including taboo practices, human trafficking, and illegal substances. But basically, there are atheists and theists. There's a coven called the Joy of Satan, which is among the 5 largest in the world. In the Joy of Satan, they are theists. They believe in both God and the devil, but they believe God is the villain and Satan is the hero. They have their own manifesto, which years ago was available on their website, where they say that God is the bad one and Satan is the good one. Then there are the atheist covens who believe that Satan was the first rebel and consider him a cool guy, but they don't really believe he exists. They don't worship Satan as an entity. It's more of an admiration for Lucifer as a symbol of rebellion. They believe he was invented by the church to control people, to make them donate money to keep the devil away, so to speak. They rely on science and logic, though they claim they want to keep laws away from their bodies and worship whoever they want in their own way without any involvement with religion. Returning to my story, I was looking for a new coven. The first one I found was just a group of kids messing around. They weren't real Satanists, but I knew magic was real because I had been practicing for a while, so I started searching for others. Eventually, I found what I would call the real deal, a big church, so to speak. I had attended a few meetings of a satanic coven, and for me, the last straw was discovering that their meetings were on Saturday nights, and then on Sunday, these guys would go to church. They didn't go there to cause trouble, but because they were Christians and wanted to sanctify themselves for the rest of the week. This made me question, what kind of satanic coven is this? It was just a club. They weren't even real Satanists. While searching for the right coven, I read a book in the library about someone who went to Bohemian Grove. I tried to find other books about the place and look it up on maps, but with no luck. I only found 1 or 2 people who had heard of Bohemian Grove. They knew it was in California but didn't have any more information. I had also found references to the Illuminati in the same book, so I started investigating to see if it was real and found many references to the Illuminati, but nothing that really explained who they were or how to contact them. My first coven was the OT type and seemed well informed about many things, so I asked if they knew of any coven that might have information about Bohemian Grove or the Illuminati, something really shady, because I wasn't finding the right group, just ones that weren't what I was looking for. They told me there was a coven called the World Church of Satan or the Worldwide Satanic Church, 2 names for the same group, which was also a Diablo SE coven involved with trafficking, prostitution, and inappropriate content. This sounded familiar to me, and I would understand how it worked. They gave me a phone number and told me to call. If it didn't work, I should call them back. I called the number, which only had a voicemail, so I left a message with my name and phone number mentioning that my coven had referred me. A few days later, they returned my call and instructed me to bring my ID and prepare for a party that would take place. They said I would probably have to park about 2 miles away and that the party would start at 9 p.m., but people would arrive earlier. I got there around 9, drove up to the building, which was about the size of a Walmart, and the whole building was shaking like there was a huge party going on. All the parking lots were full, so I had to park 2 miles away and walk back. When I returned at the entrance, they asked for my name and ID. They checked my name on the list, welcomed me, and opened the door for me. I went in and walked through a maze of black curtains, passing about 5 hallways until the curtains opened, and I found myself in a hall with about 10,000 people. There was a DJ, a live rock band further ahead, benches, sofas, and chairs with people chatting. There were tables with pizza, snacks, beer, distilled drinks, and various substances. If you wanted to use mushrooms or weed, there was a table for that. For cocaine and all other types of illegal substances, there were also specific tables. In the back, on the right side, there were 5 or 6 giant beds pushed together, with about 20 naked people involved in sexual activities. A girl saw me and said I could join if I wanted to. I just had to take my clothes off. It was 1984, the height of the AIDS crisis, so I definitely wasn't going to get involved. I told them to have fun and went to see something else. While talking to a guy who seemed just as out of place as I felt, I tried to make sense of what was going on around me, so I started a conversation with him. Let's go back to when I was 13 years old. When I was 13, I was at a sleepover and got up at 3 a.m. to use the bathroom and get some water. I saw a man walking through the house. I'd never seen him before and never saw him again. He was wearing a tuxedo, a top hat, holding a wand, and had his face painted. looking like a member of KISS in a tuxedo. I thought it was the coolest thing ever. He saw me, winked, and kept walking. I thought it was amazing. I went back to the bathroom, got my water, and went back to bed. The next day, I asked someone, I saw a guy here last night in a tuxedo with his face painted, looking like a member of KISS in a tuxedo. Who was that? They answered, you dreamed that. It didn't happen. That's when I realized my coven had been lying to me. No problem. I stored that memory somewhere in my mind, knowing I would figure out who it was someday. Now, back to the party. I was 18 years old. A similar figure, not the same man, but someone who looked a lot like him, passed by me. Tuxedo, top hat, wand in hand, and face painted. I stopped him and asked, who is that? What is that? How can I do that? He asked who ran my coven. I told him we had a large coven, with 125 to 150 members, led by 13 high priests and priestesses, and the magician did the official magic. He wore the red robe. He then said, we have 1.1 million members worldwide and are led by a CEO and a board of directors. The Supreme Magician does the official magic. That was a Supreme Magician. I asked how I could become one. He explained that the devil personally chooses the Supreme Magician. I asked how to catch the devil's attention, and he replied, I don't know. I'm not a Supreme Magician. I knew I had to get involved with the Supreme Magicians. I knew that taking babies was something the devil valued, so I decided to get involved in that circle, mentioning that I had already performed procedures with my previous coven and started doing as much as I could. I managed to perform about 5 or 6 procedures over the next 2 or 3 years. I talked to some Supreme Magicians and told them I wanted to be one. They asked why, and I explained that I had been practicing magic since I was 10, verified that it worked, joined a satanic coven, and became the magician. I wore a red robe with an inverted black pentagram from ages 13 to 18, and then I sought out this coven. I said I saw a Supreme Magician when I was 13, but didn't know what I was seeing, and since I discovered it, I wanted to do his work because I love magic, and I'm good at it. He replied that to be a Supreme Magician, I needed to be really good, with at least 90% accuracy. When you perform a spell, all the statistics are kept by the World Church of Satan in the office. There are people who track your statistics exactly. You have 90 days for a spell to work. Let's say I did a spell for you to pay my coven $100,000 to make 10 million. It might not be recorded as 10 million, but as a large sum of money. If it takes 91 days for you to get the 10 million, I failed at my magic, and that counts against me. Eventually, I received a letter from the board of directors of the World Church of Satan, which concerned me because it could either be an invitation to become the Supreme Magician or a reprimand for bringing unwanted attention to the group. Fearing what could happen, I prepared for the worst by buying a weapon and ammunition. At the meeting, I was welcomed into a room with a large leather chair, making sure no one could approach me from behind. The CEO was there and informed me that Satan had chosen me to be the next Supreme Magician. They gave me a light blue book called The Supreme Magician's Manual, which contained only drawings. The first page said that no one could tell me what to do. This meant that even if someone paid for a spell, I had the choice of whether or not to perform it. There were between 1 and 10 Supreme Magicians in the world, and I had been chosen to be one of them, which put me among the 10 most powerful people on the planet when it comes to magic. People from all sectors, including actors, rock stars, kings, queens, presidents, and diplomats, sought Supreme Magicians for effective spells. If you really want to spend $200 on a spell on eBay, you can do that, but I can't guarantee it will work. Our work isn't exactly foolproof. You might ask for $1 million and only get $100,000, but that's still better than nothing, which is probably what you'd get on eBay. And so, I was chosen as the Great Magician, which led me to get involved with the Illuminati and Bohemian Grove and to build an influential group. In my first month, I was chosen just before my 21st birthday, and a few days later, I found myself at Bohemian Grove. When I first found out I was going, I thought maybe they'd take me to a bar called Grove or to some real place, maybe a restaurant in Dubuque, Iowa. I had no idea. So we ended up landing in California, in San Francisco, and went to what I think is in Monterey, an area with 2,600 acres of sequoia trees, which didn't seem all that exciting. On my first day, I was dressed and traveling with a makeup artist who also helped me get dressed. Women, in fact, aren't really allowed there, so my makeup artist, who is a woman, along with some of the waitresses, all had to sign non-disclosure agreements. As I mentioned, my makeup artist is a woman, so she does my makeup and helps me get into my costume before I head out for my first official task. So, the great magician dresses in a certain way: tuxedo, corpse makeup on the face, top hat, and a cane. I chose a cane because I thought it would bring a bit more class, since a wand seems kind of fake. When I walked out the door dressed like that, I wasn't sure if the people at the Grove were used to seeing big magicians regularly. I wasn't sure if I was the first they'd ever seen, or if it was already a common thing. I walked about 3 meters, and a man came up to me, shook my hand, welcomed me to the Grove, and said he had been waiting for me. I asked who I was to him, and he said, "You're the great magician, the guy who makes all our dreams come true." It might not be exactly the dream I'm looking for, but I know the routine. While I was there, I met with the Illuminati. They have a Mr. Black and a Mr. White, and the first time you meet them, it's nothing special. But the next few times, you realize they're always different people. I don't know if they record what you say or if they just take really good notes, but let's say you spoke with them today, and 2 weeks later you meet 2 new Mr. Black and Mr. White, and 3 weeks later you meet others, people you've never seen before, and want to talk about a previous conversation. You start mentioning the conversation, and they begin to recount precise details, even though they weren't the ones who had the original conversation. They're able to pick up exactly where we left off, even correcting things I remembered incorrectly. I was the Supreme Magician. For the first 3 years, I tried to become the Supreme Magician. I got involved with groups that performed baby extractions because you had to be with a Supreme Magician to do that. I'd tell the Supreme Magician that I wanted to do his job, and they would just smile or laugh, because they knew I was just watching from the outside, like a fan. It's like seeing a rock star being chased by girls and driving a Lamborghini. You're not seeing it from his point of view, you know? He's not having as much fun as you think. You only see the outside, and you think you want that job. He does the official magic for the coven, drives a Lamborghini, has the world in his hands. But that's not how he sees it. I didn't know how he saw things when I first entered. In the beginning, I did magic, went to Bohemian Grove, worked with the Freemasons, traveled the world, partied with rock stars. But after a while, you realize that you have to travel, you have to go to Bohemian Grove, you have to do magic. It stops being fun. The things they said would be the most fun in the world for me, magic, weren't fun anymore. I did magic because I was addicted to it. I traveled because it was an obligation. I'm not the only Supreme Magician. Many people think it must be very hectic, traveling all the time, but the truth is, there are between 2 and 5 Supreme Magicians in the world. This number can be up to 10, but we're usually busy all the time, and it's amazing how much people want you to do things for them. Freemasonry, in a way, is like a satanic coven, but they don't have enough people to rule the world, so they need soldiers for that. And for soldiers, they use the satanic covens and the Freemasons. They've changed their structure to make it look like the hierarchy of Freemasonry. I know that many people, when I start talking about Freemasons or mention Freemasonry, the Illuminati, or Bohemian Grove, end up changing the channel. They say, "Oh, conspiracy theories, I'm not interested." However, there are many more people who end up saying, "Oh, conspiracy theory, let's pay attention." They're basically the ones pulling the levers and pushing the buttons on all the political actions happening, mostly in first world countries. But they also do a lot of things in third world countries because they can promise things and actually deliver. You use our program, do what we say, we'll help you get out of poverty. We'll donate a certain amount of money to your country or teach you how to plant crops show you something that grows even in the sand. You know, they do things like create a bathroom designed by Bill Gates, which not only serves to relieve yourself, but also cleans, sterilizes what you put in it, and even turns that into electricity. And you think, is this possible? Just to clarify, this is possible. Bill Gates did it, and I believe it was in an African country. They have their hands in so many sinister pots. It's not just the government they control, but almost every rock star as well. If you're famous, if you're on the radio, if people know you, not just in your state, but across the country, the Illuminati probably made you famous. When Taylor Swift came up, I told people she's gonna follow the same path as Miley Cyrus and Britney Spears. And people said, "Oh no, she's so sweet. She's a Christian girl. My kids love her." I said, well, it's a good thing she's so young, because when she goes off the rails, your kids probably won't like her anymore, and that's probably going to happen in about 10 years. But I warned them she's going to follow that path. And people said, no, Taylor Swift is a moral girl. She's wonderful. So, as you know, Taylor Swift admits she does magic. She's very open about it in her videos, and we see a lot of this in Hollywood, something we'll address further. Because what I'm talking about when it comes to Hollywood and the Illuminati isn't conspiracy theories. These are real experiences because I've been there with these people, I've been part of these groups. I just want anyone watching to understand that this isn't someone creating a theory or listening to others online, but rather someone who's been in these circles and talked to these people. So, in any regular spell, let's say you come to my coven. You own a luxury car dealership and sell Lamborghinis, Porsches, Rolls Royces, and Mercedes. But there's another store that sells more than you and better cars. The owner of the store laughs in your face and refuses to sell. No matter how much you offer, he refuses. So you come to the coven and say, you want something done. What can we do for you? What can we offer? And we tell you that we can give you anything, from a glass of frozen water from the freezer, which is the most basic spell, to the evil eye, which seems like a simple spell, but it's not. It's more complex. Potions, elixirs, enchantments, even a procedure to remove a baby, which is a curse. And you're desperate, you've tried everything with this guy, and nothing works. What will happen, for example, if you pay $10 million and do a curse? Well, you'll end up with the business. It's very likely we can't guarantee how it's going to happen, but it will happen the way the devil wants it to happen. You just need to be aware that you made a deal with the devil. If you're okay with that, then we'll pass it on to one of our supreme magicians, and they'll do it. So, there are different levels of spells that a magician or a supreme magician can do. The strongest, which is also the most expensive and the most likely to work, is a curse, and that involves the removal of a baby. For that, you prepare an area with your altar and everything else. You need your magical materials, and then basically you do most of the spell. Afterward, you perform the baby removal procedure, and when you do that, you need to put blood on your hands because this blood is necessary for the curse. After that, you go back to your altar and do the curse. When you do magic, basically, what you're doing is invoking Satan to attach a demon to someone. Each curse works in a similar way, but let's say I send a demon to someone. Now, a regular curse is just like the name says, the demon only goes once. It goes, and if the person is in a state of grace, the demon leaves and the curse doesn't work. A bigger curse is different. Let's say I do a tri-curse. In this one, the demon goes 3 times. So it goes today at noon, tomorrow at 4 p.m., and in 2 weeks at 2 p.m. again. It does these 3 visits. And if at any of these times the person is in a state of grace, the spell won't work. But if it's a bigger curse, what happens is that I do the baby removal procedure, the demon goes to the person, and even if they're in a state of grace, the demon waits. It stays there, waiting, and as soon as the person commits a mortal sin, the demon goes into action. In the car dealership example, the spell would be made for the dealership owner to buy the other business, and the demon would be sent to influence the other owner to sell his store. So the spell would work that way. And the reason why a curse is so effective is because the demon can wait for the moment when the person is vulnerable. When the person is vulnerable, the demon strikes or goes into action, and that's when the curse usually works. What happened in this case was that the curse was made, and the owner of the other luxury dealership died. Then they went to his wife and said, "Look, we've been trying to buy this dealership. Would you sell it to us?" And she said, "Sure, I have no reason to keep it. We made a lot of money. I'm rich, my husband died, he was insured, and now I have more money than I can spend." "How much did you offer last time?" And they said, "We offered $10 million, right?" And she replied, "Oh, you can have it for 5 now. I can't make the person die, but the demon can, and the demon needs to inform Satan, who in turn needs permission from God. If God says yes, the person dies." This is like the example of Job, where God didn't give permission. I performed 149 baby removal procedures, with 146 being successful. 3 failed. This was a mystery to me at the time. Let me explain the scenario of one of the failures. I arrived at a location where the procedures were carried out, which had 2 floors. All the procedures took place on the 2nd floor, while on the 1st floor, on our side, there was a group of satanic bikers. They were there, throwing cigarettes on the street, cursing people on the other side, making obscene gestures, flashing their breasts. There were both men and women in this group, cursing the people on the other side of the street. On the other side of the street, there were several people. I had never seen a place like this. The people had their heads down or were walking quietly while cigarettes were being thrown at them and people were cursing. However, these people seemed not to care about what was going on. They were there, on the other side of the street, separated by a small 2-lane road, but it seemed like if you gave them a cigarette to throw back, they wouldn't even throw it back. I arrived there with my entourage in a limousine, dressed in my uniform. I was informed about what was happening, and we went up to the 2nd floor. When we got there, the room was prepared. I already had an altar set up, out of sight of the people doing the procedure, so as not to scare them even more. It was bad enough that they knew the act would be carried out in Satan's name, with a satanic eye invoked, and that the woman who would undergo the procedure had already done 9 before and was aware it would be done in a satanic ritual. Oh, she knew that the only thing that would happen was offering her baby to Satan, and she was okay with that. We entered the room. I was dressed as the supreme magician, wearing a surgical mask and gloves, ready to perform the procedure. I was there with a handler, who is the person responsible for bringing the sins. If you like substances and prostitutes, for example, he will provide them for you, anything you want. He always traveled with me. Suddenly, we started hearing people from the other side of the street singing. We went to the window, which had large Venetian blinds with a crank, and couldn't understand what they were saying, so we opened the window. When we started hearing more clearly, all the bikers began running and shouting without us knowing what was happening. I heard some words and started repeating what I was hearing. When we got to the part where they stopped, the beginning of the prayer was, "Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women." We started laughing because we thought, how old must the Mother of God be, right? And that was the only part of the prayer we got to, because we were acting really silly. We decided to close the window and went back to the room where the woman was. I was there with the doctor, the procedure nurse, and all I had to do was put blood on my hands. We were all set to begin. The doctor then examined the woman and said, "You're not dilated." She replied, "What?" And he explained, "You're not dilated. This procedure isn't happening now. This will take at least 6 hours, probably until tomorrow, maybe tonight, but you're not ready." I said, "I'm flying out in a few hours." I wouldn't be able to come back in the next few days, and he said he'd do the procedure the next day. I replied that I couldn't return the next day because I had other commitments. That's when she, the woman, said, excuse me, and I answered, "Yes?" She asked, "Is this your first time too?" I said, "No, I've done this many times." She then said, "The baby's in the birth canal. Maybe you want to start soon." I was confused and said, "He said you're not dilated, and I don't exactly know what that means. I didn't know what to do. I'm not a doctor." She replied, "Don't you know how to check? Didn't you study medicine for this?" I said, "No, I didn't go to medical school." She continued, "You need to go down there and start. Things are happening. You'll have a baby in your hands." The doctor did another exam and said, "She's not dilated. The baby isn't in the birth canal." And then she started cursing at us. Some of the words I didn't even know the meaning of. She said, "You need to sort this out and start right now." The doctor did one more exam and said, "Nothing's happening." The woman wasn't dilated and kept cursing at us. The doctor and I started talking about when I could come back, since I couldn't return until Friday because I had commitments until then. I asked if I could bring another woman on Friday, someone who understood what was going on. While we were discussing, we heard the cry of a baby. We looked down, and the baby had already come out. I think the doctor said, "This is unbelievable." Then, a lawyer and a social worker came in, while the nurse took care of the baby and prepared it for adoption. There were people waiting to adopt it, and it would be adopted quickly, not by a Satanist, but by someone who wasn't a Satanist and who wouldn't kill it. And that's when it was time for me to leave. My part was done. I couldn't kill the baby, so we went downstairs, left the building, and went away. Eventually, I went back to the office, which was in downtown Chicago. I asked my secretary to grab all the files from the failed procedures because at that point, this was my third failed procedure, and I wanted to understand what they all had in common. She got all my files and also the files from the other Supreme Magicians so I could analyze them and see what the common denominator was, and then inform the other Supreme Magicians to avoid making this mistake. The only common denominator I was able to identify was that when they failed, the procedures happened during business hours, between 8 a.m. and 6 p.m. Now, something that was also common, but that I didn't realize at the time, was that everyone used different terms to describe the same thing. People talked about prayers, prayer beads, prayer chains. Whenever there was a failed procedure, there were people outside the location praying. So that was it. Where there was a failed procedure, there were people outside praying. Well, that's surprising, but at the same time, it's not, depending on what you believe. I'm not surprised because I've seen things like that happen before, but it's a reminder for any Christian that if you pray, God answers and can definitely do things like that. And I think that's why there's so much effort against prayers outside of baby removal procedure centers. They've probably realized the power of it, and now they try to fight against it. When I give my talks, I usually compare my work to working in a candy store. Not a mall candy store, but a standalone building, something with 100,000 types of candy, and you're wondering, how long will it take for you to try every piece of candy? And I compare this to common sins. There are sins that are so disgusting that you won't even try them, but you'll try all the others. You're going to eat all the chocolates you love. You're going to try all the candies you've always thought about making but never did. Those hard candies, you're going to try those too. But licorice, oh, that's disgusting. Some sins are things you would never do. After 6 months, you've already tried all the sins you like, you've done everything you enjoy at least once, and in another 6 months, you're going to try those sins you said you'd never do. Over time, you get used to your preferences, but from time to time, you step out of your comfort zone and try something new, even though 3 years ago, you'd never have done that. But now you're so bored you do it, just to change things up a little. It's like the Bible says, we are slaves to sin, and a lot of people will understand this from the perspective of dopamine, but it's the same principle. If you constantly reward your brain with dopamine, it will want more, and more, and you'll seek out more intense things. What I'm saying is, this is sin. If you give in to sin, you'll start developing a taste for things you never thought you'd be interested in, and you'll give in more and more, getting stuck in a vicious cycle. Yes, there's a famous saying that goes, sin makes you stupid. The more you sin, the stupider you get. until eventually you no longer see what you're doing as sin, it just becomes what you do. In my case, it was a little different because at some point I realized something was wrong. This happened about 3 years later, when I had already done several procedures up until that point, although not as many as I would later, because I was averaging 1 per month during the entire time I was a Supreme Magician. But at 3 years, you start realizing that when you get off a plane, you have to walk to the next plane. Yesterday, you were just partying with rock stars, and today, you're partying with more rock stars. And you have no choice. You have to be with these people. And by the end of 3 years, you realize all your clothes smell like a candy store, so you burn your clothes and buy new ones, but they also start smelling like a candy store. You break up with your girlfriend because she also smells like a candy store, get a new one, but she also smells like a candy store. No matter what you do, you can't escape the candy store. After 5 years, you realize your boss can't create a new sin you'd like, a new chocolate, a new candy bar. You get all excited, see a new sin, and think, I want to try this. You rip the candy bar off the wall and start devouring it, but soon realize it's just a new wrapping for an old bar. A new kind of substance comes up, like crack. You're going to be the first to try it, and that's exactly what you do. But as soon as you finish, you realize, wait a minute, this is just Coke. There's no new substance, it's just a new way of using it. Damn, I got tricked again. Then, you get tired of the sins and the initial excitement they caused. What once excited you no longer has the same appeal, and you start thinking about getting out of it. You realize at some point that if you decide to get out, there are 3 ways to do it. You can die from natural causes, you can be murdered, or you can take your own life. Now, all of these options mean that, in the end, I'd go to hell, because I believed I sold my soul to the devil when I was 13. So, any of those 3 options would lead my soul to hell. When I started, I wasn't sure how real all of it was. I agreed to sell my soul to the devil because I didn't know if the devil was real, and I didn't know if hell was real either. Now, as a Supreme Magician, I know the devil is real, and I'm pretty sure hell is a real place, and I'm definitely not ready to go there. I have a bank account with $87 million, but that money isn't mine. I can't spend it freely, it belongs to my coven. Whenever I have certain disguises or presentations I need to make for people, they have to know about my bank account, so that's why the money is there. I drive a Lamborghini Diablo, which was loaned to me by another Satanist. It's not my car, I have to give it back. My actual car back then, because I had several cars, was a Nissan Sentra, and it wasn't even new, it was older. I dressed as the Supreme Magician, wearing an 18th century style suit made by a very good and expensive tailor. If you saw me in that, you'd think, wow, he's really well dressed. But if you went to my house remembering that I lived in Frenchtown, Tallahassee, Florida, I don't know how it is now, but when I lived there, it was a poor area, the ghetto. If you came to my house and saw me dressed, I'd probably be wearing cutoff shorts, flip-flops, and a Metallica t-shirt. I didn't wear nice clothes all the time. I lived in the ghetto, drove a borrowed car, had $87 million, but it wasn't mine. My bank account had between $235 and $265 after paying all my bills. When I graduated from college, I had already been a Supreme Magician for about 5 years. I stopped contacting my parents and my brother. I didn't reach out to any family. When you only think about yourself and are so selfish, no one else matters to you. And in fact, I think this ended up being an advantage for me when I decided to leave because I wasn't concerned about my parents. There was no sign that I had called them in the last 7 or 8 years. I didn't write letters, and back then, there wasn't much email exchange. I had a cell phone, but I never called my parents on it. When I came back, my dad said that someone maliciously, he didn't know who, had placed a wiretap on their phones, and he saw someone climbing through the back hole, which wasn't TNT, and they were tapping the phones. So even though I hadn't been in touch with my family, they managed to find them and try to locate me this way. Everyone knew who my family was. They knew where I came from. They were trying to find me, but they never succeeded because I never looked for them or made any contact. I had been a private investigator, so I learned a few things. I was never hired to find someone and fail because I had several tricks and techniques I had learned over time about how to find a person. Everyone leaves a trail no matter what you think. We all leave a paper trail, whether you know it or not. So when I decided to leave, I moved to a place. Let me fast forward a bit. First, I took money from my own account because they were monitoring my regular account and the account with the $87 million. I couldn't touch that account, and if I took any money from it, I'd be stealing, and they could accuse me of that. So I started taking a small amount every week from my regular account, like it was candy from the store. I started taking $10, then $20 here and there, but I didn't spend it on candy. I saved that money. I did this for about 8 months. I also sold a few things I had at home, things I knew were high value. For example, something worth $1,000, I sold for $800. I knew people would want to buy it, so I got $800 for it. I did things like this, and over time, I ended up saving up a decent amount of money. I didn't put it in the bank, I kept it in cash at home. Then, I made a plan. Whenever you want to do something, there's always a Satanist who can help. I had a Satanist doctor, so I made an appointment with him. I took the road, got off at the last exit, and this would take me to his office. I scheduled the appointment for 5 p.m., the last one of the day. I went to the road, but I didn't take the exit. I kept driving until the car ran out of gas. I also took all my credit cards and cut them up on the way. In every town I passed, I threw half of them away. When the car ran out of gas, I hitchhiked to the next town. When I got there, I sold the car for scrap, grabbed a backpack, put everything I wanted to take, basically food, and bought a Greyhound bus ticket. This was in 1999, and back then, you didn't need a passport to enter Canada. So I bought the bus ticket to Canada. The reason I chose Canada was because I rarely did anything as a supreme magician there. I thought it would be a good place to hide. When I got to New York, Greyhound rejected me at the border. They wouldn't let me into Canada and didn't give me a reason. They just said I didn't have a passport. I told them I didn't need one. I had a driver's license, but they didn't care and turned me away. So I opened an atlas of the United States, closed my eyes, put my finger on the map, and thought, what is Satan telling me today? So my finger landed on Tulsa, Oklahoma, so I went to Tulsa. It's important to remember that at that time I was addicted to magic. So I was still doing magic spells every day, but in my world, demons have to obey what the supreme magician says. So I told the demons not to tell anyone where I was, because even though I wasn't part of the church, you're still a supreme magician, because the title isn't given by the church, but by Satan himself. Whoa. Once you become a supreme magician, the title is for life. It doesn't matter what you become later on. If you decide to become a Christian, you'll still be the supreme magician. No matter what I do, I'll always be the supreme magician. So I went to Tulsa, Oklahoma, and lived for a year off the grid. Then I lived 2 years on the grid. I changed my name to make it a bit harder to find me, got some accounts under that new identity, and then bought a car. I tried to enter Canada again, but was rejected at the border once again because of the passport. This was in 2002, after 9/11. I was on my way back to Oklahoma when a friend called me. I already had a cell phone back then, and he asked where I was. I told him where I was, and he said, "Are you trying to get into Canada?" I said yes, and he said, "There's a crossing near Vermont where there's no guard at the border. You can just cross straight through." So I took that route. I was about 2 or 3 hours away when suddenly I got so exhausted that I couldn't keep my eyes open. I stopped at a rest area and took a nap. But when I woke up, it wasn't 2 or 3 hours later, it was the next day. It was morning. I went to the bathroom, washed my face, came back, got in the car, and went to cross the border. I was just 2 hours away, but when I got to the border, the officer stopped me, searched my car from top to bottom, and while doing this, he started telling me his life story. He told me I was the first person he had ever stopped and that he'd been trying to get this job for 3 years. Today was his first day on the job. So, if I hadn't slept in the car the previous day, I would have gotten through, but because I couldn't fight off the fatigue and fell asleep, that long nap happened, and since now it was the next day, I got stopped. And the first thought I had was, God has a sense of humor. So, the officer rejects me, and I need to go back to the United States. By this point, I had $18 and half a tank of gas, and a friend had told me about Burlington, Vermont. Eventually, I got a job and moved up in position until I landed a job at a jewelry store. That's when my life completely changed, because I was still addicted to several things and kept doing magic. I had left the Church of Satan and the Illuminati, but I hadn't left Satanism or Satan's side. However, when I got the job at the jewelry store, something miraculous happened. I was, as I said, still addicted to magic. The night before, I did my magic spell, and a lot of people ask me what I did that night. I have no idea, because I did magic every night. Usually, I did my spells very quickly, because I wanted to finish fast and then start watching movies, smoking, or whatever else I planned to do that night. The important thing wasn't what I was doing, but that I needed to finish the spell so I could do what I really wanted to do. So I did my magic spell, and the next day, I went to work. While I was there, a woman came up and wanted to buy a pair of gold hoop earrings. She described the earrings, and I showed them to her. She tried them on and said, "These are perfect." I was about to close the deal when she said, "Actually, I'm shopping with my daughter. When I'm done, I'll come back and buy these." Duh. I had been working in sales for a while. I spent a year and a half at Sunglass Hut, 11 months at Finish Line, and now I'd been working at this job for over a year. I knew that when a woman says, "I'll come back later to buy," she's usually going to look for the same item cheaper somewhere else. But this woman had an honest expression. When she said that, I knew she really would come back. She went to the mall, and hours later, she returned. Now, we completed the transaction, I finalized the sale, she paid in cash, and I handed her the gold earrings, already with the receipt in the bag. I said, "Here's the receipt. There's an 800 number on it. If you call and take a survey, you could win $1,000. She replied, "That's great. I've got something for you too." At that moment, I figured she was going to pull out a Jack Chick pamphlet and tell me I was sinning and send me down to my knees to ask for forgiveness. That's because since I sold my soul to the devil when I was 13, I couldn't do these things. But instead of a Jack Chick pamphlet, she pulled out a cheap piece of gold metal, so cheap that if you had a can of Pepsi, you could make 1,000 of those pieces. I looked at it, and no one had ever given me jewelry. I'm usually the one who gives it out, selling jewelry and piercings in a decent jewelry store. So I recognized when something was cheap, and that metal was definitely cheap. Then she said the strangest thing I've ever heard in my life. "The Blessed Mother is calling you to her army." And I thought, Blessed Mother, ISIS maybe? I grew up in a Baptist church. You know how many names we have for Mary? 1, it's Mary. No titles, just Mary. So, I didn't know practically anything about Mary, and this woman, who I didn't know, showed up and said that the Blessed Mother was calling me to her army. I was completely confused. She said, "It's very powerful." I knew that as a Protestant, we don't bless anything, so I thought, this woman must be part of some female cult, and I'm not interested. I've already come from a couple of big sins. Her coven might even be linked to mine, so I'm not interested in getting involved with this. I started ignoring her, trying to focus on something else, but then I realized she had my money and I had her earrings. Financially, It was a win for both of us. So I asked myself, why is she still talking to me? When I started paying attention again, she said once more, "It's very powerful." Now, I was understanding that she was challenging me. I'm the supreme magician, and there are between 2 and 5 of us in the world. That number can be as low as 1 or as high as 10. This means that at some point, I could have been the only supreme magician among 7 billion people. And, my friend, that's a real power tripod. And you're trying to tell me that this miraculous medallion can touch me? I reached out to grab the medallion, and she was happy because I was willing to accept it. My plan was to throw it on the ground or slam it on the counter. At that moment, I could feel something, and I was going to tell her, "Your friend put a death curse on this. This has a protection order. Your friend bought this at Goodwill, made up a fun story, but it's not true." I thought I was going to take the medallion, tell her there was nothing there, that there was no power at all. I was going to slam it on the counter or throw it on the ground, and I wouldn't care if she got mad or if she returned the jewelry and took her money back. I was all set to say this, but when I squeezed the medallion with my hand, my store in the mall completely disappeared. Everything vanished, the woman disappeared, and I was standing in a dark void with my feet not touching the ground. The woman who had bought the earrings could still be heard, and she began talking to me about the spell I had done the previous night, saying that it was of the devil. She talked about more than 100 churches I had split, that it was of the devil, and about the more than 100 procedures I had helped perform, which were also of the devil. She told me about another 8 or 9 sins, and everything ended with, "That's of the devil." I could have been the only supreme magician in the entire world among 7 billion people, but I didn't have the power to hand someone a useless piece of cheap gold metal and transport us into a dark void, knowing all of that person's sins. Her magic was stronger than mine. I also started to think about letting the medallion fall, but what would happen if I let it fall and it landed in that dark void, unable to find my way back to the mall, back to my store? Sorry. I didn't know what to do, and I was about to panic. I didn't have anxiety back then, but I was about to have it. I didn't know what to do. I was sweating. I was scared. Her magic was stronger than mine. I didn't know what it was. I didn't know what was happening to me. And she said again, "The Blessed Mother is calling you to her army." It was like a grace from the Holy Spirit. I instantly knew it was the Mother of God, which was a very strange revelation for a former Baptist like me. For us, it would be easier to shoot ourselves than to say, "Mother of God." And as soon as I realized it was the Mother of God, Mary appeared. She was the most beautiful woman I had ever seen in my life. She smiled at me, and it was a smile I knew I didn't deserve. I was very aware of my 146 assisted procedures. She took my hands, the hand that was holding the medallion, and turned me around, leading me to her son, Jesus. I was surrounded by rays of light coming from beneath me, above me, from inside me, and at that moment, I realized that I hadn't sold my soul to the devil when I was 13. I realized that Jesus Christ was my Lord and Savior. I realized that all my magic, the New Age, the occultism, Satanism, was all false, and I realized that everything I believed was a lie. The Blessed Mother told me that my mission was to help her end the procedures, and when I opened my hands, suddenly, I was back in my store, back in my mall. The woman was still there, talking to me about where she went to Mass, giving me the address, and saying that she was the personal assistant to Father Joseph Juan. She's the busiest priest I know, doesn't even have time to talk to her, and she's his personal assistant. While she's there, her phone rings. She looks at the screen and says, "It's Father Joe, I need to take this." I said, "Go ahead, you've already explained everything." At this point, Father Joe was starting to lose his hearing, so he spoke as if everyone was going deaf too. She picked up the phone and said, "Hello, Father Joe, how can I help you?" He asked to speak with me, so she handed me the phone. I was shaking like Ozzy Osbourne and said, "Hello, welcome to the faith." She took the phone back and he hung up. Shortly after, her daughter appeared at the counter and said, "Can you bring this man everything you have?" The daughter left, and then we got 2 more calls like the one from Father Joe. Later, the daughter came back with a paper bag full of pamphlets. Why we believe in this or that, a Bible, and about 125 Christian CDs. When I got home that day, I had just gotten married, and my wife had been a disfellowshipped Jehovah's Witness. I walked into the house and said, "Hey dear, guess what? I'm a Christian now." She looked at me and asked, "Of all the things you could be, why this?" The next day, I started going to daily mass and took my wife with me. And now, my ex-wife, by the way. During the consecration, I saw Jesus. I thought everyone in the room saw the same thing. I figured if you were a Christian, you'd see Jesus, because it was the first time I'd been to church as an adult. So I just thought that was normal. I went over to her and asked, "Are you seeing that?" She replied, "What?" I said, "That man up there at the altar." She responded, "That's the priest." I said, "No, the other man." And she said, "There is no other man." I was shocked. "You're not seeing it?" It's because you're not a Christian. I thought, given that medallion, I'd instantly be a Christian, and I thought everyone there in the room being Christian would also see Jesus. I think it's important to mention that, for me, someone who had been in the occult and Satanism for a while, I was used to supernatural things, so it wasn't something completely crazy or strange to me. Although I'd never seen anything like that before, I'd witnessed supernatural events, so I wasn't scared by it, and maybe because it had become so normal to me, I assumed all Christians would see the same thing. For me, it was the greatest secret I've ever discovered. If I had known that the body, blood, soul, and divinity of our Lord Jesus Christ were legitimately in the church, I would have entered it as a child, and no one would have been able to get me out of there. I found out there was a place where you could see Jesus anytime you wanted. I asked, "Is there a sign-up list for this? Do I need to put my name on a list, and then 5 years later, when my name is called, I'll have a 4-day window to see him? And if I want to see him again, do I need to sign up again?" They said, "No, you just go." I replied, "What do you mean? No line?" I was comparing it to the line to see Elvis, who's been dead for over 40 years, and they said, "No, you just show up." Surprise number 1, the parking lot was almost empty, only our car was there. Surprise number 2, there was no line to get in. Now you're telling me I'm going to see God in this place? In that little chapel, which barely holds 20 people? This should be bigger than a rock stadium, where huge rock shows take forever to fill and empty out. Why don't we do the same for seeing God? He's bigger than any rock star. He's bigger than the biggest. Why aren't we filling stadiums to see him? And what I didn't know is that most people who go there don't see anything, but for me, it was different the first time. So, we opened the door, and I, my wife, Jesus, and this woman were there. She then said, "You can't leave until someone else enters." And bam, she went out the door. I thought, why would I leave? I'm in a room with Jesus. So I stayed there from 30 minutes to 18 hours a day, and I always say that the most peaceful sleep I've ever had in my life was sleeping during adoration. One night, I was exhausted, working long hours, and I went there. No one showed up for the next shift, and I didn't care. I thought, if no one shows up, I'll stay. I stayed for another hour. I hadn't slept for more than 24 hours, and I started to doze off. So I told Jesus that I didn't want to be caught sleeping, that I didn't want someone to come in and find me snoring. I asked him to help me stay awake. Well, as fate likes to mess with me, I ended up falling asleep, and someone started poking me on the shoulder saying, Hey, hey, wake up. I was kind of mad at myself because I knew I'd been caught. When I opened my eyes, Jesus was there. The front door of the building opened, and the chapel door did too. Then, a woman walked in. He woke me up before anyone could come in, and I wasn't caught snoring. My conversion was as intense as the things I used to do before. Since I was involved in so much Satanism and witchcraft, I faced some pretty serious spiritual attacks after becoming a Christian. One time we were on tour, I think it was in 2011 or 2012, and I was at a hotel. My wife at the time had a vision in 2015 or 2016 where she saw that Hillary Clinton would win the election, expel the church from the United States, imprison all Christians, put us in FEMA camps, and then kill us. She said, "You're too open. You'll be the first in line to be killed." I responded, "Put me in the line." She said she wasn't willing to be killed, so she separated from me and the ministry. She divorced me because she didn't want to die as a martyr. I really wanted to call her the day after the election and ask how she felt about it, because obviously she didn't have that vision from God, since God knows the future, right? Who showed you that vision? And who did you believe, if not God? That was a spiritual attack to separate my wife from me. That was one of the ways I was attacked. After all of this, you know how I'm still alive today? Because Jesus is stronger than the devil. So, supernatural protection. Yeah, that's the only possible explanation. Because if they really wanted to get me, they would have done it already, but it seems like something is stopping it from happening. When I used to do this kind of thing, in the case of child exploitation, my stage name was Tommy. When I was a Supreme Magician, you don't operate under your real name. There's no Supreme Magician named Zachary King. The name was Tommy, or Charles, or Royal. Each Supreme Magician has a different name. I don't know how they chose them, but I picked the name Tommy because it was the name I had used as a child actor. They could find me, but something is stopping them from doing so. Right after my conversion, I went blind. Someone emailed me saying I seemed arrogant. I asked my ex-wife, "Am I arrogant?" She said no. I said, "Why did this person say that?" And she explained, "Well, when people come to see you at a conference, sometimes you're the only one there. They're paying to see you. And during the Q&A, everyone has a question and you're the only one to answer. And you answer with so much confidence, you know the answer. It's really rare for you not to know the answer. And I think maybe someone mistakes your confidence for arrogance." She told me, "But I don't think you're arrogant." Sorry. So, I called every priest I knew, still a good number, and asked each one of them, "You spent 3 days with me, 2 days, a week. Am I arrogant?" Everyone said no. I even had priests tell me, "You can't be arrogant and do the work you do. You have to be humble." So, I prayed to God and said, "I don't want to be arrogant, and I don't want to be seen as arrogant. If you can help me keep humility, I'd really appreciate it." But I added, "But please, don't do it the way you do with everything, because I know asking for patience will make me lose my patience to the point of almost wanting to kill myself." I've heard this story from many people who've asked for patience. Everyone says you shouldn't ask for certain things from God, like patience, because He'll test you to your limits. But I asked, and the next day, both my retinas detached, and I suddenly realized I was blind. There are some surgeries that try to restore vision, but it's like taking a loose sheet of paper, crumpling it into a giant ball, and then trying to uncrumple it until it's completely flat again. It's impossible to do that, and you'll never be able to. But that's basically what the doctors try to do with your retina, try to make it flat again. And since that day I made that prayer, I knew my life would never be the same. The day after that prayer, I went blind, and obviously, having that disability forced me to be more humble because I needed help with many daily tasks. For example, at some rest stops, there aren't family bathrooms, and I have to wait outside the men's bathroom because my assistant is a woman, and she can't go into the men's bathroom, and I can't go into the women's bathroom. So, I wait for some man to show up. And my whole life, my father told me not to trust truck drivers or motorcyclists because they were always ready to kill, rob, assault, and take everything you have. They are bad people. A man approached, and we could hear him coming from 5 miles away. My wife looked at me and said, "What is that?" I replied, "That's going to be my assistant." Suddenly, a giant Harley appeared. It was the man we had been hearing from 5 miles away. His arms were bigger than my thighs, and he seemed to be in his 50s. His beard and hair were completely white. He got closer and kept his eyes on the ground the entire time. My wife greeted him. "Excuse me, sir, can you help my husband go to the bathroom?" He looked at her, smiled with a sparkle in his eyes, and said, "Sure." He took my hand and placed it on his arm, as if guiding a blind person, like he had done it before. He led me to the bathroom, opened the door, and asked me to wait there. He went in, put the seat down, cleaned it, and tested the lock. Then, he showed me how to use the lock and said, "Now when you open, I'll be here." I said, "Man, I've been on the road for 6 hours. You don't have to wait. I'll be a minute." He replied, "No problem, I'll wait." So I went to the bathroom, locked the door, sat down, and when I came out of my stall, he was there, guiding me to wash my hands. He helped me dry them and took me to the door. I said, "You didn't have to wait for me. I knew I was close and could find my way." He replied that his grandmother was blind, and if anyone had left her alone, they would have been in trouble. He said he had a job to do and wouldn't leave me alone. I was about to say I would pray for him that night, but before I could, he said he would pray for me. I then prayed for him. He blessed me and went back to his bike. He showed up at the bathroom to help me, but didn't use the bathroom himself. I told this story to someone yesterday, and they said, "That was your angel." It might be. Angels can come in different forms, sometimes in ways we don't recognize as angels. It could definitely be an example. Whenever I need to go to the bathroom, I'm forced to humble myself and ask for help because sometimes I have to interrupt someone as they might be the only person I know in that room. So either I ask a complete stranger to help me go to the bathroom, or I interrupt someone I know and ask for help. That's a real exercise in humility. Mao. When I was a Satanist, one of my biggest duties was to close churches. Now that I'm Christian, what God wants from me is to shut down baby abortion clinics. I do it the same way they did, by praying, and I think I've been quite successful in doing so. We've shut down 49 such places around the world. That's a lot. The average number of procedures performed each year in each clinic is about 1,500. So by closing these clinics, we're saving 75,000 babies a year. When you see it that way, the perspective really changes a lot. No. It's impossible to sell what you don't have. I get a lot of calls from people saying they can't be redeemed because they sold their souls to the devil, but I tell them, no, what you did was give your will to the devil. You can't sell what you don't own. And since you don't own your soul, the only sale you're making is a false one, a counterfeit. And it's just to deceive you and make you do things you would never do otherwise. People ask, but you can't sell your soul because you don't own it. Have you ever heard that God died for you? Jesus paid the ultimate price for your soul. You can't lend, rent, or sell your soul. You belong to Lord Jesus. May God bless you. And now, do you realize how surrounded we are by choices that can lead us away from the truth and towards a path of destruction? The journey you heard about today is not an isolated story, but a reflection of the power that spiritual life has in each one of us. Every decision we make, whether it's about what we believe or the paths we choose to follow, has a profound impact on our destiny. So, the question is, what path are you choosing now? Are you ready to face the lies that have been guiding you and seek the truth, freedom, and peace in Christ? What will you do with the knowledge you've just learned? Will you keep following the same habits and patterns, or will you take a radical step to change and transform your life forever? If you feel moved by this testimony and want to learn more about how to apply these principles of change in your life, subscribe to the channel now and turn on notifications. I want to help you make better decisions, live a purposeful life, and overcome the spiritual battles we all face. Are you ready to take the first step toward a new life? Share your thoughts in the comments, share your experiences, and let's talk about how we can grow together in faith and wisdom.
As we were heading to the dental school, a lightning bolt struck us. My nephew and I lost our lives instantly. I went into cardiac arrest, just like he did, but he didn't survive and passed away from the injuries. The electric shock burned my body, especially the skin on my chest, arms, ribs, abdomen, and legs. My internal organs were also severely affected, with my liver, kidneys, ovaries, and lungs being the most damaged and burned. I had a near-death experience and reached the gates of heaven. The experience was indescribable. Immediately after being struck, I felt enveloped by a love, peace, and light that transcended everything. It was as if time and space no longer existed. I was immersed in a fullness of love that flooded my entire being. That was when I felt God's pain, for He loved me so much and suffered seeing me at the door of heaven. God showed me how many people He had sent to help me, how many prayers had been made for me, but due to my pride and self-sufficiency, I had turned away from God's mercy.
If you felt moved by this testimony and want to watch this story and more stories like this, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Here, we share powerful experiences that can transform lives and strengthen faith. Click the subscribe button, activate the notification bell to receive updates, and join our community of faith and hope.